The views and opinions expressed in this program are not meant to alarm anyone, but merely start an intelligent discussion about an interesting phenomenon. The possibility that an intelligent life form does exist and is actively making contact with the Earth.
Welcome to UFO Update Live. My name is Jerry Black. On tonight's program, we will investigate the Hangar 18 story. What is the connection of Roswell, New Mexico crash in 1947 with Wright Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio? Were alien bodies kept at Wright Patterson Air Force Base? We will have comments from eyewitnesses who think so. We are live tonight and we want your comments. If you have any information or questions about Hangar 18 at Wright Patterson, call us at 651-1221. So stay tuned and join us for tonight's exciting edition of UFO Update Live.
On July 2nd, 1947, an unidentified aerial craft crashed on a ranch outside Corona, New Mexico, about 75 miles northwest of Roswell. The debris covered an area of several 100,000 square feet. It was discovered the next morning by the ranch foreman, William W. Mac Brazel. Brazel's son, Bill, described what his father found.
According to my dad, there was a bad thunderstorm the night before. The next day, he was out on the ranch and he found this debris. And he picked it all up in his pickup and was talking to people. And of course, there was some talk about UFOs. He was going to Roswell, and as far as I know, he got in touch with the sheriff's department. They in turn called the Air Force. Then the Air Force got with Dad and swore him to secrecy, and they came out to the ranch and picked up this debris. Wood, I call it wood, I don't know what it was. It was something like balsa wood, but it wouldn't burn, and I couldn't cut it with my knife.
Roswell Base Intelligence Officer Jesse Marcel was sent to the Brazel Ranch along with Counterintelligence Corps Officer Sheridan Cabot. There, they recovered a sizable amount of very unusual debris.
I found one piece of metal, what looked like metal anyway. It was not flexible, but it was as thin as a foil in a pack of cigarettes. It was that thin. One of my boys told me, he said, there's something unusual here. He said, I tried to make a dent in this metal, and he says, you can't bend it. You can't make a mark on it. He says, I took a sledgehammer and whammed it. I put it on the ground and whammed it. The sledgehammer bounced off of it.
Well, we flew these pieces. They told us it was parts of a flying saucer. And we flew from Roswell to Fort Worth. And we started out, they told us we'd be going to Wright Patterson in Ohio. And we got to Fort Worth, and they transferred them to B-25 and took them on to Wright Patterson.
What I remember him telling me was that they were small people. I don't remember 3 feet high, but certainly shorter than we were. Small people, pale, slightly slanted eyes, sort of larger heads, and humanoid looking, humanesque looking, but not like us, different from us. And he said they were dead, and that he had seen them, and that he had flown the wreckage of this flying saucer.
Welcome back to UFO Update Live. I would like to now introduce our UFO panel here. To my far left, we have Brian Scow, who is a physicist and UFO investigator and researcher. Next to him, we have Pat Packard, who is Assistant Director of the Mutual UFO Network for Ohio, one of the most prestigious organizations in the country. To my left here, of course, is my wife, Peggy Black. Peggy is a UFO researcher and investigator and has been doing so for 17 years now and has just started a UFO support group, which is doing remarkably well. We've had 3 meetings so far, and they're getting bigger all the time. Welcome, panel. When we talk about Roswell, panel, and the alien bodies, we're basically talking about the same thing, because the bodies, if indeed they were at Wright Patterson Air Force Base in 1947, came from Roswell. Pat, can you give us a little scenario about the Roswell thing, how it started on July 2nd, for instance, in 1947 with Mac Brazel's ranch, and how the whole thing evolved? And you and I will jump in together here on this situation, okay?
Well, Mac Brazel found wreckage on his ranch, or a ranch he was taking care of, in early July of 1947. What happens, he took it into town. He went to a radio station, some other places which come into play later in the story, but the Army got wind of it. They sent Jesse Marcel out along with a fellow by the name of Cabot, and when they got to the field, they found materials that could not be explained, and they were air material officers and in intelligence, and their job was to know what was in the air at that point in time. In fact, Marcel had been in the Air Force some time. He was a World War II ace, and later became a colonel later in his career. So this, when he went out, he knew what he was doing. He was a member of the 509th Atomic Bomb Group, which was the only atomic bomb group in the world. You had to have a high security clearance just to be in it at that particular point in time. In any case, that through various, whatever you want to call it, the Air Force released a public relations statement saying a UFO had crashed in Roswell, New Mexico. Well, immediately thereafter, they took pains, the FBI and other people, to debunk the story. They shut down the radio station. They held Mac Brazel for some time in quarantine, about a week to 10 days. And a whole lot of other things came off of that. But essentially what happened, we're trying to relate this essentially to Wright Patterson. And we know that from Roswell, the wreckage went to Carswell Air Force Base and then to Wright Patterson, the bulk of it. Some of it went, the first couple of flights went directly to Washington and went to Vandenberg, who was head of the Air Force, and some of the other top-ranking officers, including the president at that point in time. And we have some meetings that are indicative of the fact that the wreckage was shown to the president, and there were some very high-level meetings going on. But Pappy Henderson, to pick up the story a little later, flies the wreckage from Carswell to Wright Patterson Air Force Base. There's a man there who became a general and later on down the line, General Exxon. At that time he was, I think, a colonel at Wright Patterson. He was aware that the wreckage came in. Several years later, he became the executive officer, the head officer of Wright Patterson. He was aware the wreckage was kept there. He's made statements to support that. There's a whole lot of other people that are involved. There are basically 6 generals at this point in time that corroborate the story and the fact that the wreckage was taken to Wright Patterson. Now, some did go to Los Alamos, the feeling is, and some went to Washington, D.C., but there's no doubt that the bulk of it went to Wright Patterson Air Force Base, and with good reason. That's Air Technical Command, and anything foreign that comes down would go to Wright Patterson. If it's a MiG shot down or recovered or whatever the case may be, it goes there for material analysis and other things along that line.
So it just wasn't an expedient situation. This is a place where it would have been taken had it been a crash in California or wherever.
Whatever, wherever. Anything, any foreign technology would go to Wright Patterson and be examined there. Metallurgical things in particular was their specialty. But Pappy Henderson not only saw the wreckage, and there are 14 witnesses for the wreckage, first-hand witnesses, he also saw the bodies, and we have 12 witnesses for that. I'm talking about just in relationship to Roswell. So these 12 people saw the bodies. Pappy Henderson saw the bodies and the wreckage when he transported them to Wright Patterson. He was also a World War II ace. And there's quite a few other people in the chain. General Dubose, who was adjutant to Ramey at Carswell Air Force Base, came out in 1990 and made statements that they all knew it was a cover story. They released a story that it was in fact a weather balloon that had crashed. It was kind of an insult to Jesse Marcel and other people that they'd make up such a ludicrous story. I know you've recovered a weather balloon.
Right. Isn't that the final determination that the government made, though,
right.
Pat? Is that it was a weather balloon?
Interestingly enough, the government keeps very good records about recovering anything, and in the archives, if they recovered a weather balloon in 1941, it's in there. But in this particular case, there are no archives that have recovered anything. All the records are missing, which is strange in and of itself.
To show our viewers the comparison to a weather balloon scenario in Roswell in 1947, Peggy and I on our property did find a weather balloon about some 14 years ago, and I'm going to let Peggy tell you how complex it was for us, if you want to use that term, because it certainly was not complex as you're talking here. You know, we were not taken away, but just let Peggy tell them exactly what happened with the weather balloon that was found on our property and how simple it was to handle the whole situation.
The weather balloon that we found, I had been out in the field hunting corn cobs for craft projects, and it was a brown rubberish material, and it had a little box connected to it, and the box said, "Take this to the nearest post office," which I believe we took it to the children's school, I think, the next day to show the class, and then after that we took it to the post office. But it was very easy to identify that it was a weather balloon.
Were we ever contacted from the government about the weather balloon or anyone else?
Never heard anything.
So you can see the comparison there, panel, and the audience out there. There seems to be, I can't understand why they would take Mac Brazel away for days and days of interrogation. And by the way, I guess we're all aware that Mac Brazel did change his story somewhat when he came back from this interrogation.
Right.
He was of the opinion this was not a weather balloon, and he toned down his story quite a bit, didn't he, Pat, concerning the weather balloon theory?
Absolutely, and he came into some money, which is another story. Never had any money. He was a cowhand, basically. But yeah, he had actually, when he first came to town, he was hit out by the radio people and interviewed. And he told a story of alien wreckage. He didn't see any bodies himself. But when he came back out of interrogation, he more or less told them, "I can't talk about it. This is what they told me to say, and that's it. And I'm not saying anything else." But there were other people, and the sheriff, who went out to the site and saw the bodies and the wreckage at one point in time. And actually, Mac Brazel's son recovered some of the debris out there, and was, rumor got around town he had it, and he was approached by government agents and was taken away from him. There's some other people in the area there that saw Marcel's son, who is in the Air National Guard now, and he has a good rank, a colonel or something, handled some of the material out that way. And there's just so many witnesses. We're approaching 500 witnesses on this case right now. But the basic, the whole thing, the basic tenet is that they recovered it there, and they took it to Wright Patterson, and there is a paper trail. We've been able to find a lot of people that flew on those airplanes, people that packaged it up, the mortician in town who happened to go out there, and he talked to a nurse on the base, and she confided in him that they'd brought in bodies of aliens and that she was working on them.
Wasn't there a funeral director who also was approached to...
Yeah, that was the mortician, Glenn Dennis, I think his name is. But, the story is just, it's very hard to refute, and as a matter of fact, I don't think the skeptics have any good answers right now for what actually crashed there if it wasn't a UFO. As a matter of fact, you can take the story out a little bit further. There's a fellow by the name of Sarbacher who was head of Washington Institute of Technology, and he was asked to go view the wreckage. Both in 1950 and in 1985, he was approached again, and people asked him about whether he was ever extended an invitation. He was extended an invitation by Vannevar Bush, who worked on the nuclear bomb, and he was head of a lot of projects, but he was a scientific advisor to Truman. In any case, he and a lot of his colleagues were asked to go look at the wreckage and the bodies. He didn't go, but his understanding is exactly what we're talking about. There was light material there. It wasn't of this earth. There were bodies there, so forth and so on. Vannevar Bush also told a fellow by the name of Wilbur Smith, who was one of the top scientists in Canada, about the crash, and confirmed that they had recovered a UFO. And that caused the Canadian government to fund some projects on magnetism and so forth and so on. But he told Wilbur Smith that it was classified way above the H-bomb. So that's kind of the gist of things we've gotten through the years.
What about the fact, and I think our audience should be made aware of the fact that we're dealing here with not just one crash site, Pat, but 2 crash sites. Is that correct? If we're to believe the alien theory in terms of going to Wright Patterson,
right.
Weren't the alien bodies at the second crash site some 150 miles away?
Well, we suspect there were 2 different sites. Now, the reason being is there was a debris field that was enormous at Mac Brazel's ranch, but there was no main body of the craft. And evidently it had first touched down there and left debris in quite a several hundred yard, just covered several hundred yards. But the main craft and the bodies were found elsewhere. Now, that's still a little bit in debate. There's a couple of witnesses that place it on the plains of San Augustine or whatever, you know, so we're not really sure exactly where it was. But we do know that the sheriff saw the bodies, that Pappy Henderson saw the bodies, that the nurse saw the bodies, and we have quite a number of other living witnesses, like I said, 12, that saw the bodies. It's quite a few.
Don't you think the scenario of the 2 crash sites would be an explanation as to why the government changed their mind on July the 8th when the headlines were in the paper in Roswell, that it was a saucer-shaped object, and then one day later, when the other crash site was allegedly found, they changed their tune and said it was a weather balloon? Couldn't that be the impetus for it being 2 crash sites, possibly, Pat?
Well, I just think anything of this magnitude to be recovered, you know, would involve new technology, new metals. You know, obviously they performed. As a matter of fact, there's a memo dated, I think it's late September 1947 by Twining, who was asked to look into the reality of the whole thing. He states above and beyond any question that this is a real phenomenon, and that they do fantastic maneuvers, pull away at great speeds, climb at incredible angles, so forth and so on. So with that in mind, capturing this type of technology would be a tremendous advantage. So I think they would put a cover story in no matter what.
Right.
The chance to back engineer or whatever this type of a craft would put you way ahead of the Germans or whoever. This technology was actually the best at the time.
So all this information really presents a good case for the fact that there is a strong possibility that alien bodies were recovered. And as much as our viewing audience may not want to live with that or, you know, grasp that theory, we have to be very honest and say there's a strong possibility this could have really happened as far back as 1947. Well, we have an investigator, Mr. Charles Wilhelm, whom Peggy is certainly very well familiar with, as she was the first investigator in Charlie's group, the Ohio UFO Investigators League. And Pat, you've met Charles, sure. And Charles has been an investigator for some 34 years, and we had a taped interview with him that we did, and we want to show it in a few minutes. However, Pat, I want you to give your opinion of Charles. You met him a few times. He's been in this business 34 years, and I think he's an investigator ahead of his time.
Well, there's no doubt Charles was way ahead of his time. He's written a training manual that's very complete, very professional. I think you find most police departments in the country be proud to operate under that type of training manual, and he operated under it. He was very thorough, very intelligent about the things he did, and you can't say enough about his skepticism and his search for the truth. He just never quit until he found a logical answer. And one thing you got to say about Charles, he had a sighting himself that was kind of incredible, but he won't even accept that as
positive proof.
As positive proof. He's still looking for answers for what happened to him there. So.
And Peggy was his first investigator for the Ohio UFO Investigators League. And Peggy, to give us an idea of how thorough Charles was, you had a sighting in '73 which introduced you to Charles Wilhelm and his wife. Tell us how thorough he was with your investigation.
I met Charles back in '73. Whenever Charles or his wife took reports, they didn't only send out a report, but they documented everything really well. They tape recorded every conversation that you had with them. They logged every single call. Excuse me. They came out to my house, they took soil samples, and they stayed in touch with me all during the
That's what a good investigator does, and he stayed in touch with you for a real long time, and in fact, as you said, you were one of his first investigators. At this time, we'd like to roll this tape of Charles Wilhelm, and he's going to be telling us about 2 deathbed confessions he had concerning the bodies of Wright Patterson Air Force Base and the possibility of alien craft being there. So could we please roll that tape right now?
The Wright Patterson is probably one of the most famous stories that's been floating around since the early 40s. It involves craft saucers and alien bodies. The 2 cases that I retrieved when I was in my teens. I was not a full-time investigator at that particular time. I happened to know these 2 individuals. One of them was a lady, and her job at Wright Patterson Air Force Base was cataloging any foreign material that would come into Wright Field. That's the name of the Air Force Base at that particular time, was called Wright Field. And she would catalog any craft that would come in that crashed, not necessarily UFOs, because she didn't know at that particular time what she was cataloging. She was at her job at that particular time and happened to see this one individual that was rolling a table down this room, and on that she caught just a slight glimpse that looked like a body was laying on that. And she described the body to me as being a very short individual with a large head, long arms, and the skin was gray in texture. And basically that's all she really saw. She never got really excited about it because she thought that it was some type of experiment that the military was performing, which they are known to do. So this individual was a very credible individual. She was a good friend of the family, and I guess she felt that this may be some interest to me because she knew I was interested in flying saucers and astronomy. I had no reason to believe that she was lying to me because she was very sincere when she told me this. She did not give me the stories that you've heard over the years that she would be persecuted or her family would be after she would be passed away. She didn't know that she was dying. I didn't know at that particular time what she was dying from, but it was cancer. So I believe the lady in what she said she saw, but what did she really see, I cannot say for sure. The other incident, again, was another individual that I met and who also lived in the neighborhood a few blocks away. And his job was a security individual at Wright Patterson Air Force Base. And he too claimed to have also seen not only one of the bodies, but also one of the craft that they had still fully intact at Wright Field. And again, it was only for a brief incident. It wasn't for a prolonged period of time. And he just happened to be in the wrong place at maybe the right time or the wrong time, whatever you want to say. And again, he relayed this information to me, knowing that I was interested in the subject of UFOs or flying saucers and astronomy. Again, I have no reason not to believe this gentleman. He seemed to be very sincere when he told me this. Again, as I stated earlier, I was in my early teens at that time. I was not a full-time investigator. I've had many people over the years ask me, well, why didn't you get a signed statement? Well, for a young individual at the particular time would have never thought of something like that. Even if I would have and got signed statements, what are signed statements? They're a dime a dozen. I could have anybody sign a statement to the fact of the information that they gave me. But over the years, I would say those are probably the 2 most credible cases that I've had, only because I knew these people, I knew they were sincere. I've had many other incidents relayed to me by military people that are fantastic, but I also have had military people tell me that whenever you're assigned to Wright Patterson Air Force Base, if you want to try to get on the laughable side and try to con people, just talk about little alien bodies at Wright Pat at your local pub or maybe somewhere else, and you're going to find somebody who's interested, and the rumors will start running rampant. And this is what a lot of people have done over the years. Unfortunately, it's disinformation, and this has caused many, many problems for UFO researchers.
Welcome back to UFO Update. And I just want to tell you again, this is a live program, and we would appreciate your calls at 651-1221. We saw Charles Wilhelm there, panel, and he was expressing this two deathbed testimonies that he was giving concerning a body at Wright Patterson and also concerning an object. But interesting enough, Pat, this was done at your home. And interesting enough, one of the tapes that we didn't go on with, the part of the tape we didn't go on with, is where he says, and I put a direct question to Charles, do you believe, yes or no, that there's bodies at Wright Patterson? And interestingly enough, he said he did not believe they were there.
Right.
That's interesting, because here's a man who's had two deathbed testimonies, but are not personal eyewitness to that situation, and yet that's how objective this man is. So I think it shows a lot of credit to Charles in his objectivity, which we lack a lot of in the field nowadays, that he's willing to make that statement. Mm-hmm. It's just not quite proof enough for him that the bodies are there.
Well, not only that, but Charles has had autopsies given to him by doctors here in the state, a couple of doctors, and he will not go forward, even though it would make a big splash in the UFO community. He's had them for years and years, but he won't put those out until he finds someone else to stand by that story, and that's the way he's very meticulous about that kind of thing, and he's got quite a good reputation. But some of the things, Charles even sells some of his own information a little short. For instance, the lady that saw the body on the gurney or whatever, she got a pretty good look at it. And it was about 5 or 6 seconds, he's told me in the past. He makes it sound on the tape as if it was just a fleeting glimpse and gone off. Now, that's pretty good evidence, and why they'd have anything else down to resemble this particular... In 1958, I believe the year was, I can't really recall, but why they'd have any other dummy down there or anything else. They do have cryogenic storage facilities, or did have at one time. We know that, so why they'd have those, I don't know.
Brian, give us some idea of the material that was found there in Roswell. What kind of a material was it, and what was the analysis made on the material?
Well, a lot of the eyewitnesses mentioned a shiny silver metallic material that was flexible, yet it seemed to bend back and retain its shape. They said it was fairly easy to bend, but it would always go right back into its original shape. Now, at some point, as far as when they took the pictures of the material, they actually may have switched and put in an actual weather balloon to say, well, this is actually what we found was a weather balloon, and it's ridiculous to think that it may have been a crash saucer. And it's also interesting that why would the military take so much interest in a crashed weather balloon, so much to fly it over to Wright Patterson Air Force Base? Right.
They're still doing weather balloon flights today, almost on a daily basis throughout the country. So what's so extraordinary about a weather balloon crash?
Right, I don't see why they would have to fly it all the way to Air Technical Intelligence Command, I believe was what it was called at the time at Wright Patterson. They've all seen weather balloons, they know what it is.
Right.
So
there was way too much work done on this situation. The taking away of Mac Brazel, the blocking off of the roads in and out of that area that we've confirmed.
Right.
There's been 2 good books written about this Roswell situation, and I think they're excellent books, and people should go to the library or bookstores and try to pick those up. I understand we have a phone caller right now. Do you have a question for us on UFO Update Live?
Yes, I do. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. I have 2 questions. One, why haven't more witnesses come forward who may have seen or witnessed this event? And 2, do alien bodies deteriorate like human bodies, or is it possible that these bodies are still in existence in some form? That's it.
Okay. Well, first of all, there's almost 500 witnesses that have come forward now, but they're not all first-hand witnesses, just about Roswell. I think if you stay with us, we've got some other people on tape that will verify that many people have come forward. A lot of them do not want to be known. Lynn Stringfield, who'll be on in a little while here via tape, has around 44 people that have seen the bodies or the wreckage, not necessarily at Wright Patterson. I think 10 or 11 of them have been into Wright Patterson. The bulk of them have been into other places around the country where these bodies or wreckage have been stored, or they've been there when something's been, I don't know, crashed and recovered. And these witnesses are college professors, they're MDs, they're PhDs, they're generals. So it's not your run-of-the-mill. Unfortunately, we don't have anyone that quality on tonight, but there's many, many witnesses. As far as the deterioration of the body, it's very difficult to tell that. You know, how fast they deteriorate. I don't know, Brian, do you have any ideas on that?
I believe there was a story about a crash saucer with an alien survivor. I don't know if this was the Roswell crash or not, but I know there was a story where an alien actually lived at one of the air bases for a number of years before it finally did die. But again, that's just a story. I don't know if that was, do you know if that was the Roswell crash? Or?
Well, let me put it, at Roswell, when they recovered the bodies, they called a mortician in town and asked him to supply ask him how he'd handle bodies that were left out in the wild for some time. So evidently the bodies were deteriorating. He told them something about packing them in ice and so forth and so on. The nurse did tell the mortician. The mortician went to the base, couldn't gain access, was run off. The next day, the nurse, who he saw when he was there, asked him out to lunch, and the nurse tells him that they were operating on these things, autopsying and whatnot, and that some of them were pretty badly deteriorated. At least they had a very bad stench to them. So I can't really tell you any more about the deterioration. We've had some people that have touched them, supposedly. You know, there's no way to verify this 110%. But I think if you pick up a book by Randall and Schmidt called Crash at Roswell, in fact, I have a new one coming out in the next year, they've gone to tremendous lengths to document all this, and they're both former investigators. One's a former Air Force investigator. They've done a tremendous job, and it's very difficult to find any possible answer that they haven't covered, from the V-2 rocket to the flying wing to Fugu balloons, that they've dug into great depth and found records and about when these things were launched and on and on and on. There's really no other possibility. And when you think that this wreckage was flown to Washington, we have a timeline where the president meets with the senator from New Mexico and the head of the Air Force and the next thing, and the head of this and the head of that, and it caused quite a turmoil. And there was two or three flights that went, and these flights left after the fix was in, after they told everyone that this was in fact a weather balloon. These flights took off for Washington, D.C. Now, General DuBose, who was there at the time, Ramey was the head of Carswell at that time. General DuBose says it was a cover story and it was a crash of an alien saucer, although he did not see it personally. But that's what he was communicated by Ramey, who did have access. So
we want to thank you for your call. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much. And listen, some more of you call into the show tonight, because we are live, and we have a good panel of experts here that are waiting for your phone calls. So please call us at 651-1221. Peggy, you mentioned before about Marcel and General Ramsey having a meeting at Fort Worth, and what happened at that meeting to show Marcel that there was a cover-up going on that he later told people, I think back in 1983 on television?
There were packages of debris taken to Ramey's office. One was 2 or 3 feet long, shaped in a triangular shape. There were 2 or 3 small boxes about the size of shoe boxes wrapped in brown paper. The airplane pilot said that when he lifted the boxes, it felt like they contained nothing. They were very lightweight. Ramey and Marcel were talking for a minute in his office, and he asked him just exactly where did you was this debris located? Where did you find it? So he took him to the map room, and while he was in the map room, when they came back, the debris was on the floor, and it had been changed. It was a weather balloon.
It was a weather balloon.
It was spread out.
That came from Marcel, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So again, like I say, please give us a call. We'd like to hear from you people out there. And right now, panel, I think we ought to introduce a gentleman we're going to have a tape on in a few minutes, Leonard Stringfield. And any time that you talk about UFOs, anytime you get into a group discussion about UFOs, whether it be a symposium, just a one-on-one conversation, this gentleman's name has to come up, especially when you're talking about the Roswell and Wright Patterson, because for the last 15 years, Mr. Leonard Stringfield has devoted all of his time to crash retrievals, has written 3 or 4 papers on crash retrievals. And Pat, you had a chance to meet Leonard. We've been to his house a couple times. And what's your opinion of Leonard Stringfield?
Well, let me put it this way. Len is very trustworthy. He's a guy you could tell a secret to, and he would never divulge it. He won't tell me a lot of his sources, but through the years he's collected quite a few. I mentioned that he had 43 or 44 people now that have seen bodies or wreckage and handled it, and they run the gamut, but a lot of them are very top echelon type of people. But he will not divulge your names. As a matter of fact, the Roswell crash, the uncovering of that crash, starts with Len Stringfield's work on crash retrievals. And in fact, he knew the names of Jesse Marcel and Pappy Henderson, and a lot of these people were people he had talked to and were in his stable of informants, and he would not release those names to Stanton Friedman and some of the others, Schmidt and Randall, who wanted to write books or do TV shows or whatever the case may be. In any case, Len knew him first. Len got the information first. And a lot of people say, well, now he won't tell us the name, so therefore it's no good. But years and years later, these people came to the same conclusion, and a lot of these people ended up going public. Pappy Henderson was dead by that time, but his wife and others came out and spoke on his behalf. And the bottom line is it proved that Leonard had been right the whole time. Now, I'm not saying everything he turns up, and I'm sure he'd say that too, is right on the money.
I don't think Leonard gets enough credit. I think Leonard does a lot of work in ufology, has for some over 40 years, and he's not near gotten the credit he should have for all of his work. We do have a phone caller panel. Bob, what's your question for UFO Update?
Well, my question is, I listened to Leonard Stringfield talk on a radio show a few years ago, and he said that I was interested in what they found on the part of the craft that was supposedly intact. He claimed that there was a lot of military's type secrets and things like that our country had learned a lot of things from. And is that why, and the other part of my question, is that why the government won't release information about this? Most people are pretty readily acceptable that there might be alien life, out in the universe.
Is your question mainly, Bob, then, why doesn't the Air Force release all the information if it has this information concerning the bodies of Wright Pat?
Well, what I'm concerned about is what have they learned from this alien craft, the part that's intact, and then if they have got this information, why they're not releasing it to the people,
Pat, you want to?
Well, I think, first of all, you could look at the study done for NASA by the Brookings Institute, and that will probably come into play in a future show we're doing, and you might have read something about here recently. But the Brookings Institute wrote a study for NASA, and it said if, in fact, you discover alien artifacts on Mars or anywhere else, you should not release that information because it would destroy our economic system, the underpinnings of our societies, our religious beliefs, and so forth and so on. Having talked to a couple people that have seen the bodies and looked into the eyes or whatever, or at least have claimed to, I know that they had tremendous emotional problems describing these things, and certainly, I think you'll see in the last interview of the night, and I think she says this affected people's lives, made a complete change in their belief system, what they thought was possible, and so forth and so on. Now, the technological reasons, I think, are pretty obvious. If you've got this type of technology and you're trying to back engineer it, which, by the way, Bob Lazar and others say we do have, and that we are trying to back engineer it, we may not have made tremendous amount of progress. There's a lot of film footage from Area 51 out in Nevada, and China Lake and other places that seems to indicate that we have something flying around that has tremendous capabilities. Why the government does what it does and why they don't tell us, in my opinion, I think it's ridiculous. As far as releasing secrets like this, my last comment would be we spent 30 years on the Kennedy assassination with some of the best attorneys and the Congress, the Rockefeller commissions, some of the best journalists and other people looking into it, and we still don't know the truth. There's still 10,000 or who knows how many pages that have not been released, so we'll probably never know the truth. The government's just not going to let us, and I think it's too important, technologically and sociologically.
What kind of technology have they gotten from people that have told you, though? What they've studied it. Have you gotten any feedback on what kind of technology?
We hear a lot of things, that stealth technology came out of it, that transistor technology originally had something to do with it. But there's no way for me to I'm not a very technological person. Maybe you can answer that, Brian.
Well, you had mentioned about Area 51 out near Las Vegas, Nevada. Area 51, Area S4, there's a lot of different names. But what many people have said, in fact, Bob Lazar has said that the aircraft or spacecraft that they are flying in that area is actual crashed saucers from other crashes that have happened. And he has said that we are using their spacecraft to figure out how the engineering was done on those spacecraft, as far as us being able to repeat the same thing. And I don't know whether the stealth technology has come from that or not.
Well, okay, listen, caller, we want to thank you for your call. Thanks a lot, Bob.
Thank you.
Let's go to that tape now, panel, of Leonard Stringfield. And Leonard's going to be giving us some input and discussion about Hangar 18. So if we can roll that tape from Mr. Stringfield right now, thank you very much.
Is there any doubt in your mind that materials were taken there from whatever happened at Roswell, New Mexico, whatever crashed? We've got a complete chain of events that takes us right there. We've got General Exxon, who used to be over Wright Patterson, who's come forward and said that in fact these things were there, although I don't think he ever had direct access. It was above his security clearance. Are you confident that these things were taken there from Roswell? And
no. Yeah, I feel, I can't prove anything, but I want to emphasize that all along the way. As far as proof, that's one thing, but evidence, massive evidence is what I have. Yes, I would say that parts and pieces, artifacts, to what size, I don't know. I don't have that kind of information. Had been delivered to Wright for high-tech, purposes, for example. That's where the work is being, it's a logical place for it to go. And much of that had been sent to Wright Pat. I've been in touch with numbers of people who saw things came in and what have you, and work as guards or worked there, who was aware of or even in charge of a program. Not just the Roswell, but other crashes.
when you talk about it being the place to have it taken, that's because at Wright Patterson they do metallurgical work there. And
it's research and development, all the high-tech stuff is there.
Right, so if there was a crash or we had a Soviet airplane, it would likely end up there for some type of analysis.
Now, some of the items, because of the, for reasons I can't explain, either because of the size or the problem of conveyance, or for other reasons, was sent to other places out west. They couldn't just ship it, put an airmail stamp on it and send it to Wright Field or Wright Patterson. But the same way with the bodies there, for years it was maintained as the clearinghouse for a lot of that. It was all kept underground.
We have first-hand deathbed statements of people that had high security clearances, and their names are known. I can't remember the lady's name right off the top of my head, that did in fact see the bodies there. And we've had someone come forward not too long ago claiming that they had seen a body there. I wouldn't attach a tremendous amount of credibility in that case, but still...
what was related in that case and others like it, and some way beyond it, they all tally. They tally. The information, each case is analogous to the other. I find that in my work, which I have, so much material from so many sources, finding some of the pieces are beginning to fit in the lower section of that pyramid.
Right.
See, and doesn't mean the ultimate, the the big answer, which is up at the top. But I mean, you got enough of the bottom stuff that it starts to it comes together in a rational way. I've had talked to guards, and they were blindfolded, taken down, down below ground, and witnessed things. Seen the bodies. Others who seen them come in from other crashes, got close-up looks. Others who claimed they even touched one, dead one. One thing that impresses me about all of this, all the observations, whomever is involved, is the way they describe the eyes. Practically everyone who was within a reasonable distance of the alien body was impressed mostly by the power of those eyes. The darkness, the sinister look, the bigness. Right. Even in death, they looked like they were alive.
What about Hangar 18 and all those stories we hear about Wright Patterson?
Well, Hangar 18 is again like walking through the Hall of Mirrors. You can use any name to make it sound important. You throw it out there because it has a certain mystic quality about it, and whether it was Hangar 18, 18 and a half, or 1933 or whatever, it doesn't make much difference, but I understand it was just a plain building. Whether it had a number or not, I don't know. I was told that the fellow who was right in there said he didn't even know it had a number. It was a place to go. I mean, no one got in there unless you had the proper Q clearance. And that's what counted. It wasn't the building number. The structure in the beginning was rather crude. They had piping, to keep the cryogenic conditions proper, the freezing conditions. They had not enough technology in dealing with this sort of thing in the very beginning to have the equipment except to keep things on so-called ice. And later on, nitrogen and other ways and means of doing this became, high-tech stuff, and they were able to preserve and work on the bodies and ship them parts and pieces to various hospitals for observation amongst various medical people with certain expertise.
I want to thank Leonard Stringfield for allowing us to do that interesting tape, and we really appreciate his cooperation in doing that. I understand we have a caller. Betty, welcome to UFO Update.
Hello. My question is very simple, but I'm curious. As of the present time, has anyone gone back to the location of the crash sites? And is there any change in the vegetation or growth of trees or anything, where these crashes happened?
People have gone back to the crash site, but they went the first expedition back, or the only expedition actually, I think, was in 1988. As far as changes in the vegetation, no, there were no changes in the vegetation that I know of. They did a relatively thorough search. This debris field was very big. They didn't find anything. There is rumored to be one piece of wreckage that Pappy Henderson had, the fellow that flew it from Carswell to Wright Field. It was called Wright Field at the time. He did show that to a dentist, and I think the dentist's name was Schreider or something like that. I can't. And a couple other people, and they described the same properties that Brian was talking about earlier. You couldn't burn, cut it, you couldn't hit it with a sledgehammer and dent it, but it was light as tin foil. And that was one of the key things.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your question. We have another tape here, Pat, and this is a woman that you interviewed, and we're going to have to refer to her as Madam X. And she has an interesting story about viewing the alien bodies, I believe. And can you give us just a short synopsis of what we can expect to hear?
Well, this is the type of story we get quite often. Now, this is a little bit more in-depth than a lot of them, and we did some research, but there's no way for us to prove one way or the other whether this is 100% a true story or not. I will say that when she told the story and she spoke about the eyes of these creatures, that she cried the first 2 or 3 times uncontrollably, and that for some reason there was a hold it still had on her. But she was in, according to her, Wright Patterson Air Force Base, and went down with someone else, saw the bodies and so forth and so on. It's a long story to make it short because we want to get it in. The fellow disappeared right after that. She's supposed to go to work with him, and he disappeared off the face of the earth.
Okay, let's roll that tape now.
What he told me was that, now what I'm going to take you to see, I don't want you to ever tell anybody, and this is very important that you keep this all a secret. This has got to be confidential, and don't ever say anything because it could cause me to lose my job. And then we went out there and went through the security gates. He had clearance, and he had a little badge thing that he wore, and he had like a little card that you insert into like a little mechanized thing on the wall, punching a code. But he got past a couple people just by saying that he was bringing a friend in for some, and they never questioned him. So apparently I thought he was some kind of a big shot out there, that they knew him well enough that he could bring somebody in to show him something, but he didn't say what he was going to show me. And then we went into an elevator and went down, it seemed like forever, and went to a room that had vaults in it, stacks of vaults. And to get into that room, he had to punch in another code, and when we got in there, he proceeded to open one of the drawers, and there was a little black zippered up bag, and he unzippered it and pulled it down about halfway over the torso. And what, to me, I'm convinced was definitely one of the little grays. He was expired, he was kind of frozen up, but his eyes were open, and they were like a shark's eyes. They were black, and they were frightening. They were just something I've never seen before. It changed my life from that moment, seeing that, because I didn't think, oh, this is some kind of a joke or a trick anymore after that, because seeing the hand especially, I didn't see the lower part of the body, the genitalia or anything like that. I don't know what was down there further, but the shoulders were thinner than ours. The head was larger. It looked like a child. It looked small, like a 4-foot tall child. But since then, I've heard that they're all small. That was probably an adult. Listening, I asked him if I could touch it because I thought maybe this is some kind of a plaster cast or something. And the hand was so strange, so different and everything. I thought, well, maybe they made up this model, some kind of Hollywood deal. And it felt like, I don't know if you've ever felt an iguana's belly. It's like scaly, but it's smooth. Yeah. But that's what I can closely equate that to it, more than anything else that I've ever touched. But it was slender and very shallow shoulders, and the arms were kind of lengthy for something that small, but the hands were what were really interesting because they were like partly a little bit webbed in between part of the fingers, and the fingers were longer, and the nails were like more of a claw than a nail, and the fingers were more elongated, and the last finger was too. And if I'm remembering correctly, I think there were only 4 fingers. I don't think there were 5. I think it was just like the 4, like a, and then they were webbed part of the way up, but it didn't have fingernails like ours. It was just so strange to be in a place and see something like this that all your life you never thought really existed, and to see it, and for some reason, just looking at it, it looked, I don't know, scary in a way, or evil, or like it was not, it wasn't like a little cute little guy like E.T., like, you think, oh, this is going to be a little guy that's going to be real endearing. He looked real like he could control you in a minute, like those eyes were just like looking at a shark. It was like cold, and I don't know, I'll just never forget it.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think we've given you a lot of information to think about now concerning the old Hangar 18 story. But right now, I'd like to ask Brian if he would give us his opinion about Hangar 18.
Well, given the credibility of many of the eyewitnesses, both military personnel and medical professionals, I think we're definitely dealing with something that's out of the ordinary. I think in no way could it have possibly been a weather balloon, and have all these people mistake it for a flying saucer and come up with the stories of the aliens.
Pat, what about your opinion?
Well, Jerry, I really don't know. You know, I'm from Missouri. You got to show me, I guess. That's one of the reasons I got into this. There's a lot of fascinating documents, stories, highly credible people, and what have you. But until I see it with my own eyes, I guess I just won't 100% believe it. So,
I think I can sum up my opinion in this way, and that is to say that you can't prove it 100% that there were bodies of Wright Patterson, Pat. I think I totally agree with you on that. But I think if I had to make a call one way or the other, I think I would have to say the preponderance of evidence certainly shows that there was something there other than a weather balloon.
Oh,
there was something there of
yeah.
such interest, and the fact that we have 12 witnesses to the actual bodies, I'd have to make a call and say that the UFO craft was at Roswell, was taken to Wright Patterson Air Force Base, and there were bodies connected with it. I can't believe that Pappy, his wife, and everything are just in collusion on a situation like this.
Yeah.
Peggy, you have a support group, which we didn't get a chance to talk too much about, but give us an idea when this next meeting is coming up, because the group is growing and growing. We had 40 people there last time. What's the situation for this month and in December coming up?
Our next meeting will be on Tuesday, December the 14th at the Milford Library. It's on Route 50 in Milford at 6:30 p.m. It's from 6:30 till 8 o'clock.
Okay. I certainly want to thank Bob Leibold, our producer. I want to thank Zach and all the floor crew here, all the women and men behind the cameras did a terrific job here tonight. I want to thank everybody connected with the show for making this possible. And I especially want to thank you, the viewers out there, for watching tonight. And I hope we did give you some kind of insight on the Hangar 18 theory. And by all means, go out and read the books that we mentioned to you. And the main thing is to keep an open mind about the subject. So panel, again, thanks for all of you being here tonight on UFO Update Live.